You might already know that zodiac signs are made of 4 primordial elements: fire, earth, air, or water. But if you want to learn which ones are which element, why they are that particular element, what that means about the zodiac signs, and a bunch of other really beautiful stuff about how these elements relate to the genders of the signs as well as to the planets, then watch this video a few times. I believe the classical zodiac of astrology is one of the greatest works of art humanity has yet to conceive. Its 12-fold equal dimensions, its rulership by the 7 planets, its stratification of gender binaries, and its patterns of elemental triplicities and modal quadruplicities. Each one is so balanced and symmetrical, and each one interacts with the others so gracefully to weave an incredibly rich symbolic framework that reflects the depth and complexity of life itself. So we've had 4 episodes so far in this series, right? So far we've explained the first episode is the concept that astrology is actually beautiful and artistic, and that it shouldn't really be tampered with because it's already very beautiful and delicately balanced. The second episode, we explored the romantic simplicity that creates the 12 zodiac divisions themselves. The third episode, we talked about the symmetrical rationale which determines which planets rule which divisions. And in the fourth episode, we talked about the rich spectrum of gender that's expressed by the zodiac. Now, in this 5th episode, let's turn our attention towards the elements of the zodiac. You may have heard Aries is a fire sign or Scorpio is a water sign, but now let's ask why and what does it mean? If we want to know why Aries is a fire sign, or why Scorpio is a water sign, or why any sign is whatever element it is, then we have to look to the 4 cardinal directions. The 4 cardinal directions are projected or exist in outer space as the 4 tropical tropos, the solstices and the equinoxes. If that is over your head, don't worry about it. You don't really need to understand that to be able to understand the rest of the video. And also, if you do want to understand it, you can go back and look at episode 1, where it was fully explained. So anyway, you have 4 cardinal points, and you have 4 primordial elements. Each one of the elements is rooted to a particular cardinal direction. The element of fire is rooted in the east because the east is where the sun rises. Then the element of earth is rooted below us because that's where the earth is, right? So it's rooted to the south, or the low point, the lower solstice. Then the other 2 elements, the remaining 2 elements, are complementary to these 2. So fire is in the east, right, as we explained. Its complementary element, which is air. Air enables fire to burn. So it's the complementary element. And that element is on the complementary direction. So fire in the east, that means air is in the west. And the complementary element for earth is water, which makes earth fertile and allows it to grow. So earth is below, water is above. It might seem like, how can water be above? But that's where the source of the rain is. So the rain falls from above, the water falls from above onto the earth. Now you have your 4 cardinal directions, and you can make sense out of why they are associated to particular elements. It makes sense that fire is in the east where the sun rises, earth is below, air is on the west, and water is above. Now, as we also learned in episode 1, the zodiac signs are anchored to these 4 cardinal directions. The cardinal signs, the 4 cardinal signs, are the signs which are actually affixed directly to those 4 cardinal directions. And they have the element that is the element of that direction. So in other words, Aries is a fire sign because it's the sign that's anchored to the eastern direction. Capricorn is an earth sign because it's the sign that's anchored to the lower solstice, and the lower direction is where earth is. Libra is an air sign because it's the sign that's anchored to the west, and the west is the complement for the east, so the west is where the air is. And Cancer is a water sign because it's anchored to the upper point, and the upper point is where water comes from. So that's awesome. Now it makes sense why at least these 4 cardinal signs have the elements that they have. But there's still 8 signs left. What about them? Why do those 8 signs have whatever element they have? It works fairly simple. Each cardinal direction will echo to a trine from it. And then the signs which are at the trine from the cardinal direction will have that same element as the cardinal direction. So for example, Aries is in the east, so it's fire. It will echo trinally, and that will send fire to the 5th and the 9th divisions, which are Leo and Sagittarius. So hence the 1st, 5th, and 9th signs, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, are fire. And that will work for any cardinal direction. So the earth element, which is of Capricorn, below, it will echo up into its trines, which is Taurus and Virgo. The air element of Libra in the west will echo out so that it exists also in Aquarius and Gemini. And then the water element from Cancer will echo to Scorpio and Pisces. And this accounts for all the 12 signs and why they have their elements. Now that we know why the signs have the elements that they have, let's talk a bit about what this implies about the signs. What do these elements signify? So it continues to be quite simple and rational and pretty, beautiful. So fire, what is it? Fire is something bright and fire is something hot. And it's that simple. You just think a little bit more deeply about it. The brightness and the hotness of fire are the qualities which are present in the element of fire, and hence are the qualities which are at the foundation of the 3 fire signs. Bright and hot. Bright means it shows things. It shows you what things are. It brings things to light. It clarifies things. And hence, fire signs are clarifying, which means they're definitive. They're clear-cut, and they're decisive about things. Fire is also hot. Heat is energy. It energizes things. So fire signs are catalytic, and they will spark things to action. They will motivate things. They will even give directions and tell things to start happening. Now let's take a look at Earth. What's Earth like? Well, Earth is solid, and stuff grows in it. Right? So Earth is solid and fertile. Solidity means that you can rely on it. So the signs that are made from the Earth element are pretty reliable, pretty solid, pretty regular. Dependable, patient, steady, forbearing, etc. These are all adjectives that can apply to these earth signs. And earth being fertile, well, that means it's productive. So earth signs tend to be healthy, productive, fertile. And if you can combine this with the solidity thing, they're practical, realistic. They like tangible, real things. Now, for the air element, what's air? Air is something you breathe and keeps you alive, and air is something that blows around and moves leaves and moves things around, right? So air is enlivening and it's mobile. Because we breathe it and it's enlivening, the quality of the air element is that it's lively or enjoyable. And so these air signs, they tend to like to be lively. And also when you breathe, you can use a voice. Breath is the basis for a voice. So the air signs like to speak. They're communicative. And that communication has to do also with moving things back and forth, whether it's ideas in a conversation or if it's leaves in the wind or shipping things back and forth or selling and buying things. So air signs are good with sharing. Air signs are good with exchanging, trading, doing business, as well as communicating. And then the final element, which is water. Water is what? It's shiny. It's reflective. If you look at it, you can see yourself. And what else is water? It's mysterious and deep. So because water is reflective, the water element signifies reflection, introspection, and it's deep. So it means thinking deeply about things, pondering on things, reflecting. Deep and mysterious means considering the inner aspect of things. So water is emotional. Water is also supple or softening. It moisturizes things and makes them flexible. So water signifies being more movable, more easily moved or reshaped by your experiences. So the water signs are emotionally active and emotionally affective. And they're also introspective, thoughtful, and deep. Great. Now we know why the zodiac signs have the particular elements that they have. And we also know what those elements signify. We can turn our attention now to looking at the patterns that these elements form. What we find with the patterns formed by the elements is actually the basis upon which relationship astrology is based and geometrical aspects in astrology, like the trines and so forth. Because what are the patterns that we find when we look at these elements? We find trines, we find inverse trines, or sextiles, half trines. We find squares, and we find poles, or opposites. So as we already know, the trine from any sign will be the same element as the sign, right? So the trine is going to be very, very mutually supportive, mutually understanding, because it's the same element. Now the inverse trine, first of all, what is an inverse trine? What you do is you go to the opposite point and then draw a trine. The inverse trine is always complementary to the element. If you start from Aries, Aries is fire, you go to the inverse point, which is Libra. Libra is air, and then you take the trine from Libra, which will be the other air signs, Gemini and Aquarius. So the inverse trine from Aries, which is fire, will all be air signs. And this will work for any sign you do it from. It will always be the complementary element. The inverse from Taurus is going to always be water signs. The inverse trine from any earth sign will be water signs. The inverse trine from any air sign will be fire signs. The inverse trine from any water sign will be earth signs, etc. This is very interesting. So that means that this shape, this inverse trine or this sextile, as well as the signs which are in it, they are supportive or complementary. Then the other important shape that we notice when we look at how these signs are working with each other is the square. The square from any element is always antithetical to it. So for example, watery Cancer and earthy Capricorn are square to fiery Aries. Water and earth are antithetical to fire because they put fire out, they extinguish fire. Fiery Leo and airy Aquarius are square to earthy Taurus. So fire and air are antithetical to the earth because they sterilize it and turn it into sand. They turn it into desert. Earth and water prevent the flow of air, so earthy Virgo and watery Pisces are square to Aries Gemini. Fire and air evaporate water, so fiery Aries and airy Libra are square to watery Cancer. So you see, I'm just illustrating with these four situations that the square from any element will always be antithetical to that element. Hence, these positions are not compatible in relationship astrology, and hence the square in the geometric aspect system is an uncomfortable aspect. Now, there's one shape remaining, which is the pole or the opposite. When we look at this one, we see something really interesting. The opposite to any sign is part of the inverse trine, right? So it's going to be complementary. It will always be the complementary element. The opposite sign will always be the complementary element, but the opposite sign is also part of the square. So it's not just complementary, but it's also contradictory. And this actually makes the opposite sign the most compelling sign to interact with, because it's challenging but also supporting. And this is the basic recipe that causes good things to happen. Challenging but also supporting. The challenge inspires you to try to do something that you wouldn't otherwise do, and the support enables you to succeed at it. So this is really cool, right? Because this geometry between the elements is the basis of a very reliable theory of relationship compatibility astrology, and is also the basis for the very useful geometric aspect system that's extremely popular in modern Western schools of astrology. Now, I would also like to mention something else interesting about how the elemental patterns interact with the gender patterns. Now, we already fully explored this. Like, we explored it way more than I'm going to do now in episode 3. So if it's interesting to you, please go back and watch episode 3. But the gender of the zodiac signs is actually based upon the gender of these elements. Fire and air are masculine elements, and water and earth are feminine elements. So you see every fire sign is male, every air sign is male, every water sign is female, every earth sign is also female. Now, this pattern of gender is also the pattern for something else interesting that we haven't talked about before in this series. The pattern of gender is also the basis for the pattern of planetary friendships, which is extremely central and important in Vedic astrology. As we learned in episode 3, fire and air are both masculine but not equally. And similarly, water and earth are both feminine but not equally. Fire and water are extremely masculine and feminine. Earth and air are mixed or moderately. They have a blend of masculinity and femininity, but air is a bit more masculine and earth is a bit more feminine. Now, just as gender plays a significant role in who gets attracted to who, not always the case, but it does play a significant role in who gets attracted to who. Similarly, the gender of the signs determines really how the planets form their friendships or enmities with each other. So what you find is, if you look at the rulers of the water signs and the fire signs, you come up with Mars, Jupiter, Sun, and Moon. These guys form a union. Their team. In Vedic astrology, we know that this is the basic friendship system, is these 4 planets are friends. And then if you look at the rulers of the mid-gendered signs, not the very strong, dominant gendered signs, but the mid-gendered signs, that's the other group. Who rules these signs? Who rules the earth and the air signs? Venus, Mercury, and Saturn, who form the other team. So really, really amazing things we've discovered when you look at something really simple, just like what elements are where. We discover the basis for the whole aspect pattern system. We discover the basis for the whole relationship astrology theory or system. And we find the basis for the whole friendship and enmity between planets, which is crucial to determining dignity. Well, I really hope that this video clarifies the very rational and systematic nature of the dispersion of elements through the zodiac signs. I hope you enjoyed watching these beautiful patterns unfold and can more deeply appreciate how delicately and perfectly balanced and intertwined all the intricate patterns in the classical zodiac truly are. I hope this video helped you appreciate one of the many beautiful symmetrical aspects of the classical zodiac, and how it interacts so gracefully with other zodiacal facets to weave an incredibly rich symbolic lattice that is truly one of the greatest creative works of art humanity has ever conceived. If you like this video, you can use this playlist to watch all the videos in this series. And of course, please don't forget to like and subscribe and leave some comments. Thank you so much.